I am Michael Kajubi. I am an LGBTQ entrepreneur, the founder of McBern Tours and Travel and the McBern Foundation.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. On today's episode, I am really excited to be interviewing Michael Kajubi again, who's friend of the show, episode 103. Michael, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Rod.
Yeah. As a reminder, if folks didn't have the chance to listen to our previous episode, what was over a year ago, Michael is the founder of McBern Tours and Travel, which is an inclusive tour company providing premium service tours in Uganda and throughout East Africa. He started his business in 2013 with the intention of supporting the McBern Foundation, which helps marginalized aging adults and young people who have survived some form of family rejection because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Michael's business mantra is TRIP, transparency, responsibility, integrity, and professionalism. So Michael, so much has changed since we last spoke. Right now, you're joining us from Toronto, Canada. And I was hoping, just for our audience to understand a little bit about why you're not in Uganda right now. Could you share a little bit about your journey? What's changed in your business, given everything in the world that's happening right now? Yeah, just kind of catch us up.
Okay, thank you, Rod, for hosting me again. I am in Toronto for basically one reason, because things have changed in business. Things have changed for me back home. The last time I had an interview with you, I really went out to pioneer LGBTQ business to a company in Uganda, and also putting the foundation on the forefront. The foundation helps, like I said in our episode 103, our foundation was started because of the tour company. Both go hand in hand. Because we would not get money to support the foundation, we started the tour company to have the proceeds help the elderly that are at risk, and also the marginalized youth, who are basically the LGBTQ folks that have been disowned by their families because of who they are, because of who they love, and those others that have lost their jobs. So basically, I started this to be able to support the youth with employment and also empower them. In the past 1.5 years, I think, I've gone out to advocate more for LGBTQ tourism and to advocate for equality for gays and lesbians, and also to make sure that our partners in tourism, like the Uganda Tourism Board, the hotels, and other service providers, are inclusive and welcoming to everyone. So at some point, I've had interviews from different magazines and websites, and also partners that are members of the IGLTA, which is the International Gay and Lesbian Travel Association. So towards the end of the year, I think it was 28th or 29th December 2019, one of the LGBTQ organizations back home in Uganda published one of the articles, interview, that was published on one of these websites. And they copied and pasted the article on their Facebook page. What happened is my landlady saw this article, took screenshots of it, and wrote me an eviction letter from the apartment, since I was staying with LGBTQ people and also running an LGBTQ business in her premise. She gave a copy to my neighbors and also the local authorities. 3 days, that was mid-January. 3 days later, 19th of January, my neighbors came and attacked me. I was preparing breakfast. I had hot oil on the pan, ready to fry eggs. And then they held me, two guys held me side by side, fought me, and the other got the hot oil using a spoon and poured it on my stomach. And they told me I had to leave. It was not a home for gays and it was not acceptable. So they warned me that if I did not leave the premises, something worse would happen. So I had to leave that exact night, not to stay there because I would be attacked. I started moving on from place to place, staying in motels, hotels, friends. But then I knew that I was being followed because the letter was given to local authorities. I knew I was putting my friends and whoever would house me in problems. So sometimes I didn't sleep under a roof. So luckily there was an event that I had to attend in Toronto, which was a tourism event to explain better how to map Uganda as a tourism destination for the LGBTQ folks. So when I came here, I knew it was going to be hard for me. I want to do a lot more for the community back home. But then if I died, then I wouldn't do as much as I would be able to do while alive. Okay. So that's how I came to stay in Toronto at the end of February. I thought through it. It was a very tough decision to make. But then I knew that I cannot help folks, I cannot help people if I'm not alive. So better to be alive and keep helping than dying and then all dreams die.
Wow, Michael, I thank you for sharing this, just your story and how you have arrived in Toronto. And I words just right now can't really express just how deeply sorry I am that you had to experience just something so traumatic, knowing that by doing this work, which is so much about giving back. The last time we talked about, from the inception of starting a tourism business, it was primarily to fund a foundation to help young people who've been rejected from their homes and to assist LGBT folks who are aging to get the care that they need, because LGBT folks in Uganda are slipping through the cracks, right?
Yeah, that's sure. That's for sure.
And I knew, the last time we talked, just the risk of doing an interview would be. And I remember you saying, how important it was for you to be doing these kind of interviews to shine a light on what is really happening in Uganda.
Yeah.
And I thank you for doing that. It's such a selfless act to stand up to power and abuses of power in the ways that you're doing every day. And I want to thank you for your bravery, because that is not easy.
Thank you.
You're sacrificing yourself, your safety, and also your well-being in a world that requires us to work in order to survive. And how your business was basically, I mean, your life was completely shifted once your landlady was caught wind of some of the interviews that you were doing. And, and this is sanctioned discrimination, right? Like that someone can find out something that you're doing to make the world better and use that as grounds for justification to, evict you from your home. And then, like you said, staying with friends and family, being followed by a variety of people, whether they're affiliated with the law or not. I think that your story is so powerful and so important, and you are powerful and important, and the work that you're doing really, really does matter. So I wanted to kind of thank you for that. So when you left Uganda, can you share a little bit more about how you arrived in Toronto? Did you seek asylum or refugee status, or how did that How did that move happen? Just to help our audience better understand your journey from Uganda to Canada.
Yeah, when I left Uganda, I arrived in Canada and I attended the event. And after that, I'm in the process to seek for refugee status.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's in the process now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're still running your business then, is that right? Or are you taking a break from that?
I would not want to take a break. I am here and I have a team back home in Uganda that's still there to run since I was the face of the organization. So I was more at risk than the rest. So I would want to keep it that way, to be the face. In a safer place, but still there are people that need to be helped. If at least the tour company is under threat, then the foundation has to go on. I mean, the youth, the elderly, they need to get food, they need to get clothing, they need to get skills, they need to go on with lives. Many have had a very tough time during this pandemic, the COVID-19. Many LGBTQ folks, because we did not have enough funds, they had to leave their places. Many were co-sharing with them, and then they had to go back to their homophobic families because they had nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So it's quite a very big challenge. And sometimes when I talk to friends, I feel like I have the survivor's guilt. Many times I feel that maybe I should not have left because there are people back home that need me more. But then I feel I can help them better when I'm only alive, not when I'm dead.
Yes, I think the survivor's guilt is definitely understandable, and you, like you said before, it's you're in a place where you have a platform. People internationally know the work that you're doing and want to support you and the folks that are in Uganda, really suffering right now. And I think that this is a good opportunity for listeners who might not be as familiar with what is happening in Uganda. Certainly check out episode 103 for general background. I think right now, in terms of the pandemic, I've kind of looked through some news. There's an article in May in Pink News, which is a UK media outlet. And they were talking about how homeless queer Ugandans in particular are super vulnerable for the reasons that you had mentioned. The pandemic is happening. People need shelter. And so some are alleging that the government officials are using the pandemic as a way to further persecute LGBTQ folks. So
that's for sure. That's true.
Yeah.
Because many believe that the COVID-19 is a punishment from God because of the LGBTQ activities around the world. That's crazy.
Yeah.
But that's what they think.
Right. Yeah. And so it's just this grounds for justification for just unchecked behavior. Can you describe a little bit about like what you're hearing from folks that you're still in touch with about what that looks like? Because before we hit record, we were kind of talking about things that for sure are happening and some of the sensationalization in some journalism that's kind of skewing, the facts. So because you're so connected to communities that are really suffering at the hands of government officials, what does it look like? What are you hearing? What are the challenges that folks are experiencing right now?
Actually, being in Toronto is like I'm still back home in Uganda. I wake up when folks in Uganda wake up and sleep sometimes when they go to sleep. Actually, many ask me when I do sleep because I'm always awake when they are awake, because I keep talking to them. I've heard many folks were and are still and should be supported by the McBern Foundation calling me, and I have to do counseling all the time they feel is too much weight on them. Many were called in co-living spaces, like living with friends, staying with friends, no jobs. And then the pandemic hits, there is a lockdown. There is a shelter that was attacked by the police. Actually, the people in the shelter called the police for help, and then from the mob, actually. And then they were instead arrested because they're LGBTQ, much as they used other forms of reasons that they were not following the social distancing as directed by the Ministry of Health. But it was clear that with the videos that came out, they were only blaming them for being LGBTQ. So many don't have where to stay. They've been forced to go back to their homophobic families. So the treatment there wouldn't be nice. Many do not have food. They do not have shelter, where to stay. It's tough. It's very tough. Many do not have access to the antiretroviral treatments because they can't access them, and because of how they will be treated if their families got to know, and even those that were arrested in prison did not get their treatments just because of the homophobic tendencies that are in prisons, and they couldn't have access. So it's a very tough time. There is a lot of problems with mental health going on because people are getting depressed with whatever is happening around them. Imagine many have lost their jobs. They have nowhere to stay. They are struggling with food, basic needs, healthcare, and then they have to live with people that always, always, and every day remind them that they are sinners, that they are not meant to be in society, and that whatever they're doing is wrong, and that's not who they are.
Yes, I think you do a really great job of just walking us through the costs of discrimination, right? What you were talking about with everything from police brutality to not being able to access healthcare if folks are imprisoned, just the cruel and unusual punishment that's happening there, religious persecution, and obviously the impacts that discrimination has on our overall well-being, our mental health. And so much of what you're sharing, while it looks different here in the United States, I mean, right now we've got the Black Lives Matter movement that's really pushing and demanding justice for just unchecked police brutality that's just rampant in every part of the United States. And so much of liberation, right? When we talk about centering racial justice and pride, it's about all of us, right? And that we are very, very interconnected. And I wonder, we're talking to entrepreneurs, business owners, and folks that care, right? At these kind of really special intersections of, we're running businesses. We want to make sure that our businesses are doing good, and we want to give back to our communities. And what are first ways, Michael, that, like, if you're thinking about businesses that have connections to some of the bigger corporations, multinational corporations that have presence in Uganda, how can we pressure, regardless of where people are listening to this podcast around the world, how do we apply that kind of pressure on businesses in Uganda to speak truth to power to government officials there to stop this, or to at least change practices to, do what the systems are meant to do rather than target really marginalized folks?
That's very good. And the civil rights movement, the LGBTQ organizations always talk to the government and with these organizations and exert some pressure on the government to stop this. Many times the government may say, okay, everyone has a right. They can always come out to say that some in the media, in public. but the root problem is with the mob. Much as the government is against it with the tough laws that were passed, but also many of the problems that we face as LGBTQ people back in Uganda is from the mob. I was attacked at my apartment, and it was the mob. I would not report them to police because I would only be arrested. Mm. There can always be the pressure that we put from these corporations, yes. But then I think we have to do more as LGBTQ folks to support the local LGBTQ communities. Like I will say, or I can say now, that part of the mission of McBern Foundation is to transform the lives of LGBTQ youth folks, is to give them vocational skills, is to empower them, is to give them a skill that they can work with, that in case they do not even have a job, they can create a job for themselves, that they can be financially independent. And like I said, I think in the last episode, that if we have our people, our LGBTQ youth folks empowered, slowly they are going to set up their own businesses. And possibly when they do this, we shall have the pressure from within than from out. So if we have people, if we have the LGBTQ people empowered with skills, let's say computer skills, carpentry, tailoring, mechanic work, plumbing, name it. Slowly they are going to employ themselves. They are going to start up small, medium enterprises. Then we have, let's say, 100 or 200 businesses in Uganda. And then that are giving tax to the government. And with that, the LGBTQ community within Uganda will have the power to pressurize the government better to stop whatever they are doing to us, with, of course, the help of the international community. But I feel that we have to strengthen more and support the folks down there and be empowered and create jobs for them. That way, if we start with empowering them, empowering us, and form a strong alliance, then it will be much easier.
You've just laid out the blueprint of how you start a movement or how you grow it, and you're certainly a movement leader in Uganda for sure. I mean, what you're talking about, expanding economic opportunities, starting with basic skills, developing skills, and there's just, as you were talking, Michael, just so many different ideas of how that can be done. Do you see examples right now? I know that the work that you're doing is a big part of what you just suggested in action, right? Do you see interest from other business leaders who are LGBT or allies, whether in Canada, the United States, other countries that you have close relationships with, where people are accepting that challenge, are saying, we have this business model where we're working with a virtual team, and we would love to kind of develop some younger folks to get skills to do content creation, or I don't know, whatever those tasks are. Do you see any strong examples of that right now that give you hope, or do you have a vision of what that could look like with what you're doing at McBern Foundation that you want to grow?
I've not met so many people that have that sort of vision, and I always sell it out to them. Mm-hmm. Like I was at a panel at ITB, and I talked about the same. I've had another interview, I always write about that. So I'm looking for people who have these ideas to work with and form this strong movement that not only gives donations that last for a short period of time, but to create a sustainable project that can last for ages. So the listeners, if people are out there and they have this and they would want to reach out, I'll be very glad. I'll be very happy to work with people to create change. Because during this pandemic and from the time I arrived in Toronto, I've talked to people here, and the problem is not only in Uganda. I think the problem is world over. Yeah, because I've heard that many young folks here, teenagers in the shelters, in the homeless shelters here in Toronto, are LGBTQ because their families have disowned them, and they're turning into using drugs just because they feel they have no reason to living. And I think it's not only in Uganda that this can be done, but it can be done everywhere to help our folks and have better lives for them.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you on that. I think the devastating impacts of rejection, whether it's family rejection, faith rejection, rejection from communities, that has long-lasting impacts that unfortunately are very, very negative. And there's enough research out there that underscores what we know, what we know and what we see, unfortunately. And I agree with you. I think that this vision is worldwide. I think it is something that is truly, truly needed for young people, for young LGBTQ people. It's needed here in the United States. It's needed in Canada. It's needed in Uganda. And there's a lot of smart people who listen to this show, a lot of smart people. And I think that there's a real opportunity of ways, when we talk about how are you giving back to LGBT communities, thinking of your younger self, of how hard life is in general as a young person, figuring out who you are in the world. And on top of that, realizing, there's something different about you. There's something different about who you like or who you are that the world is telling you is different or sometimes wrong or bad. And we know that that's not the case. And yet there's still young people hearing these messages. So what are ways that we can disrupt them with the power that we have, with the influence that we have? And I really like what you were saying, Michael, about, as just thinking about Uganda, if you're able to deliver vocational skills and deliver skills on how to start and run small and medium business enterprises, those businesses are operating in a country that collects taxes, and money is going into those services, getting stronger. And, you organize an LGBT entrepreneur lobby or movement, and people can't ignore you. You're growing your power and you're protecting yourselves. And that is like what I'm saying. I mean, that's movement building. And we see, in Canada, they have the LGBT Chamber of Commerce there. In the United States, we have the National LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce. And those folks, here in the States, we've got an administration that's pretty hostile to LGBTQ people. I think regardless of what your political ideology is, there's enough facts out there to underscore the reality of that. And yet, the NGLCC is still in Washington, D.C., still, knocking on doors of the administration to make sure that they understand there's economic power that our communities are generating here. And I think that you have this unique opportunity where you're just starting that in a country that has a lot of potential to grow and to get better. This piece on the mob that you were talking about, I think for folks, if you're tuning in from the United States, I grew up in the South, right? There's certainly the version of the mob that I would say is equivalent to white supremacy groups and relationships with police, and how that can feel very scary if you are a person of color, in particular a Black person in the United States, and in particular if you're LGBTQ and at the intersection. So there's a lot that we can relate to in understanding, and the realities of how severe the situation is in Uganda as well. So again, I think we are so interconnected in so many ways, and our collective liberation depends on caring about those who are more marginalized than we are. So if there's ways that you can step up, if there's ways that you can dream up, building out this vision that Michael is sharing, this is that opportunity. We have a lot of opportunities right now in these very uncertain times, and the worst possible thing that we could do is throwing up our hands and thinking that we have no power. And maybe that's the intention of people who don't really like who we are in the world. And I would say that is the opposite of what is the reality, is that we do have power, and it's on us to move forward and to join others who want to dream up a better world. This is our chance to do it. Michael, we were talking before the interview, there's a number of groups that are on the ground in Uganda that you have close connections with. And one you had mentioned, Sexual Minorities Uganda. Can you talk a little bit more about that group and what they're doing right now, and ways that people who are not in Uganda can connect with them to kind of check in? Hey, do you need donations? Do you need food? Do you need like actual supplies? Like, what are the things that folks not connected with that group can do to get more plugged in and to get real-time information that's happening on the ground?
Yeah, we have so many LGBTQ plus organizations. One of it, the one that I founded, the McBern Foundation. And then Sexual Minorities Uganda is the umbrella foundation that brings together all LGBTQ organizations. So you would call it our Chamber of Commerce, basically, if it was business. If it was for business, it would be like our Chamber of Commerce in Uganda, where the rest of us converge from time to time and for directions, for support. Yeah.
That's really super helpful. In our show notes, I'll have links to, obviously, to the McBern Foundation, to Sexual Minorities Uganda, and I'll do a little research myself on kind of what they're up to, just so that there are some concrete actions for all listeners to really think, what can you do if you are moved by Michael's story. And again, I thank you, Michael, for sharing what you did share.
To talk more about Sexual Minorities Uganda, it does a lot of the political side. To talk to government, talk to the embassies, connect with the other corporations to fight for the rights. So they're into the rights movement, the human rights, to fight for our rights to be heard. And also, if people are arrested, these are the people that we first reach out to because they have the political power, the political structures that talk to government, that talk to the police to help take people out of jail, like the 20 people that were arrested from a shelter. Sexual Minorities Uganda, with the legal partners, which is the Human Rights Awareness and Promotion Forum here, they did quite very good work to make sure that the 20 people get the justice that they needed to get out of the prison, even though it took quite some time to get them out.
Yes. And I think I think what you were able to share here is just that connection of political organizing and having a group like Sexual Minorities Uganda able to cultivate those relationships with elected officials, similar here in the United States, like to a human rights campaign or the National LGBTQ Task Force, right? These are organizations with strong relationships with government leaders at the highest levels to communicate on a regular basis of the realities of what's happening on the ground for so many LGBTQ folks. So that is really important, coupled with what you're doing at the McBern Foundation, which is building economic power. And again, kind of just similar to the Chamber of Commerce here in the US, it's so critical that it's a both and. And I would say that there's a third component to all of this, which is when we're thinking about the general population at the most extreme, thinking about the mob as you described your experience, white supremacy groups here in the US, the education, the ongoing education that it takes to dismantle myths, dismantle old ways of thinking, to shine a light on our unconscious biases. I mean, changing or influencing hearts and minds, I would say, is a start, not changing necessarily, but influencing hearts and minds to maybe think a little bit different from your own experience. That empathy building is so critical. It's the piece that takes much longer, and it's the piece that I think really, really moves people to kind of look in the mirror and figure out, what do they want their legacy to be on this planet? What do they want to be remembered for? And I think most people believe that they're the heroes in their own stories, right? So it's building those bridges that is also so important. Michael, we've got a little bit of time left, and I want to give you the opportunity just to, any final comments that you have, any final thoughts to kind of give some inspiration to those listening as entrepreneurs of how they can be a part of the solution that you're dreaming, and what the world can look like in the future.
Okay. I'll repeat that for McBern Foundation, our vision, our mission is to transform lives of the youth, the LGBTQ folks, and the elderly is basically the health. And how do we get to this mission to improve and ensure better livelihoods of the people in society? Is through empowerment. We are looking at empowering youth with skills, with education, such that they can be able to have this education, have this knowledge, and use it beyond a year or two and help others to do the same. So if there are any education opportunities, many of the LGBTQ folks are out of school. And I believe much as I would want to do the technical skills, some of the LGBTQ folks can do better, can study online, if there are any educational opportunities, scholarships, could be online classes, could be exchange programs, to be able to impact the education, to impact the skills for our folks to learn something. Because we may always come and ask for funding, but how long is this going to go on? I look at empowering the community, empowering the people, such that they can be able to help others in the future. Because I know there will always be people that need to be helped. So the sustainability of whatever we are doing is what we are focusing on, is what I'm focusing on, to see that we make lives better. And in the future, when funds permit, possibly you can have a community center, because that's my vision. Set up a community center that has co-living spaces where women and men girls and boys can all live together happily. We had a problem of the arrest of the 1920 LGBTQ folks, the gays and trans women, just because they were only possibly guys in that living space. We are looking at having the lesbians catered for as well. So if we have a co-living space that has lesbians and gays, trans men, trans women, I believe it may be hard for it to be a target that possibly these are only gays or these are only lesbians, because then it involves everyone. And possibly that can be a secure place where people co-live happily with like-minded people. They learn to get a skill, and then also their mental health. They have counselors and people to talk to. They have nurses and doctors that can treat them without fear, because that's also a problem back home. So that's what I can say for the vision, and also what we have to do. As also SMART does the political bit, McBern Foundation will do the business model and empowerment.
Michael, thank you. I think that is there's not much more to add on that charge, and that vision is so beautiful, and I thank you for sharing it. For listeners, this is your time. This is your time to flex your rainbow superpowers. If you're an ally, you can flex your superpowers as well for Uganda, and really thinking about ways that you can show up in this moment. And if you can give and get involved in any way, starting with educating yourself, please do so. This is about all of our liberation. And again, Michael, I thank you for sharing your story. We will have the link of where to find Michael online in our show notes, McBern Tours and Travel. Michael, could you quickly share that link of where folks can find you if they're at their computers right now?
Yes, I can be found on Facebook as Michael Kajubi. I can be found on Twitter at Black Maple Guy. Also on Instagram, Black Maple Guy. And for our websites, we have McBernTours.com, and also for the foundation is McBernFoundation.org. And also for those that have donations that can reach out to us, we have online donations on the same page, and also can reach out to SMART for support.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael, for sharing all of the places that we can find you online. And I really encourage folks, the best ways of understanding what's going on in the world is through small interpersonal relationships, right? So follow Michael on all of the social media channels, and I'm sure that you will learn a lot and build a really great relationship with him. So Michael, thank you again for being on the show. It's a privilege connecting with you. And I thank you for taking time out of your day to share what's going on in Uganda, and keep going. You are absolutely leading a movement, and it's such an inspiration hearing from you. So thank you. And for our listeners, thank you for tuning into this week's show. It's always a privilege to connect with you and so many folks like Michael. This is how we strengthen our community. This is how we grow our economic power. This is how we influence hearts and minds. And it's how we change the world. So thank you for joining me and being a part of this journey. And we will be back next Tuesday, same time, same place. So if you found this episode really helpful, please continue to download, subscribe, rate, review the podcast, and consider sharing this particular episode with other folks. It's super educational and very concrete in ways that we can show up and support folks in Uganda right now. So with that, I encourage you to keep showing up as authentically as you want. And until next time, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.